Danny Dragon, Danny's Easter by Jean and Jamie Illingworth. Susie had a new teacher, Miss Blackburn, who had just moved from Wyram from Manchester. Miss Blackburn had lots of fun ideas, and Susie was telling her friend Danny all about Miss Blackburn's latest plan. "We are going to have an egg race, Danny," she said excitedly. "We are going to roll Easter eggs down the hill, and whoever's egg gets to the bottom first will win a giant Easter egg." "Down my hill?" said Danny, looking worried. He didn't know what an Easter egg was, but was too concerned about having lots of people near his cave to ask. "Oh," said Susie, suddenly realizing why Danny was worried. "She doesn't know about you." No one officially knew about Danny, who was a dragon, but centuries of rumors about monsters living in the caves at the top of the hill and the regular strange noises and flashes of fires meant that people in the nearby village of Wyram kept well away. Everyone apart from Susie, of course, who was a brave little girl and loved her best friend Danny. Danny's proper name is Daniel Gan O'Agan, but as that was too difficult for Susie to say, she simply called him Danny, and together they had many adventures. Said Susie. "I know. We'll hide at the entrance of your cave and no one will know you are there." So over the next few days, Danny gathered branches and piled up rocks in front of his cave. On the evening before the great egg race, Susie pushed leaves and moss into any spaces, leaving just one small gap so that Danny could look out and watch the fun. Happy that no one could see him now, Danny curled up and fell into a nice deep sleep. Danny was abruptly woken the next day by a lot of noise and peered out through the gap to see several small children running around excitedly outside his cave. A tall young lady with colorful hair was trying in vain to get the children to line their eggs up behind a piece of string stretched across the top of the hill. One little boy, who Danny recognized as Susie's friend Jack, was throwing his egg up in the air and catching it. He threw it up again and it slipped out of his hands and rolled towards the cave, getting tangled up in the branches blocking the entrance. Jack rushed to grab it, but as he straightened up, he looked straight through Danny's spy hole right into his big green dragon eye. Jack screamed, dropped the egg and fell backwards and then somersaulted feet over head towards the top of the hill and towards the row of eggs now lined up ready for the race. He tried to stop himself, and the somersault turned into a sideways roll, knocking the eggs in all directions. Jack continued to roll over and over down the steep hill, going faster and faster, the eggs rolling down with him. Some eggs bounced over him before getting squashed as he rolled over them, and the others shot off in all directions. The children ran after Jack, laughing and shouting, before throwing themselves into a row alongside him, so that they all ended up in a tangled mess of arms and legs and smashed eggs at the bottom of the hill. Miss Blackburn was laughing too hard to do anything at first, but eventually ran after the children, and after checking that no one was hurt, she helped them all up and took them back to the school. Once the coast was clear, Danny pushed aside the barricade and came out of the cave. All seemed very quiet after the chaos of the children, and he looked around and breathed a sigh of relief. He was watching the rabbits playing on the hillside when he saw something shiny snagged in the pile of wood and rocks outside his cave. Pushing the branches carefully aside, Danny was surprised to find a large silver egg. The only egg this size that he had seen before was a pink and gold egg, which had hatched into his cousin Ambrose. Danny clearly remembered his aunt telling him it was important to keep an egg warm. So he gently took the silver egg into the cave and lit a small fire. He then curled around the egg and fell asleep. When Danny awoke, it was dark and the fire had gone out. He felt around for the egg, but all he could find was some crinkly paper. He sent a quick blast of flame into a pile of wood, and by the firelight he could see he was lying on a brown puddle. He tried to rub the sticky mess off his belly and got it all over his claws. He started to lick it off them and discovered for the first time in his life the delicious taste of chocolate. For the rest of the night, Danny tied himself almost in knots, trying to lick every last bit of chocolate off his belly. Danny told Susie all about it the next day, and they had a good laugh about him trying to hatch an Easter egg. Susie then went out and collected up all the bits of shattered egg that were spread across the hillside and brought them back to a delighted Danny. Some pieces were still wrapped in foil, but he couldn't wait for Susie to unwrap them, and he swallowed them down, foil and all. The last biggest piece he gave back to Susie, who unwrapped it and ate it happily whilst leaning on his warm but still slightly sticky little round belly. "Because no one won the great egg race," said Susie, "Miss Blackburn has asked my uncle in the post office to put the giant prize egg in the shop window and raffle it for charity." After Susie had gone home, Danny was too full of energy from all the chocolate he had eaten to settle down to sleep. He kept thinking about the giant egg and was very confused. In days gone by, he had known quite a few giants, and he knew they didn't lay eggs. Maybe Susie had meant that the egg was as big as a giant, but if that was the case, it wouldn't fit into the post office. Danny decided he would just have to go and see the egg for himself, or else he would never settle down to sleep. He glided silently down into the village and landed behind the church, out of sight. Once he was satisfied that the coast was clear, he tiptoed around to the post office as quietly as a dragon with sharp claws can. In the glow from the street lights, Danny could just see a large purple egg balanced among straw on a big box in the post office's window. He was surprised that Susie had called it a giant egg, as although it was a lot bigger than the egg he had tried to hatch, he thought he could still probably eat it all in one go. His mouth watered at the thought, and he leaned closer to the window to get a better look. A flickering light at the back of the post office caught his eye, and he got a fluttering feeling in his belly that told him that something was wrong. The egg forgotten, he crept down the alleyway beside the post office and peered round the back door, which was standing wide open. Two men in dark clothes with hoods up over their heads had their backs to the door. One was holding a large bag and a torch, and the other was grabbing handfuls of money from the open safe on the wall and was shoving it into the bag. Danny let out a small angry roar, and the men whirled round in shock. The torch fell to the floor with a clatter, and the bulb shattered. In the sudden darkness, the men, still clutching the bag of money, backed away from Danny into the shop. There was a crash as they knocked over the box in the window, and the giant egg fell off it and rolled across the floor. The egg caught one man behind his knees, bowling him over like a skittle. He collided with the second man, knocking him backwards, and he fell headfirst into the egg, which became firmly jammed over his head. Staggering to his feet whilst trying to remove the egg, the man lost his grip on the bag and Danny leapt forward and caught it. Quick as a flash, he spun around on his tail and shoved the bag upside down over the other man's head. Both men stumbled about in a panic, trying to free themselves, but trying to get away from the terrifying dragon at the same time. Money fell around them from the upturned bag, and one man skidded on a pile of coins and bumped into the second man. Both fell to the floor, and Danny quickly grabbed a roll of parcel tape and wrapped it round and round them before they could get up. The next morning, the postmaster was astonished to find two men on the floor, taped untidily together, with the tape wrapped tight around the leg of the counter so they couldn't move. One man had a bag over his head, and the other one had his head stuck inside a large chocolate egg. On the floor, all around them, were piles of money. When the police officer arrived, the robbers begged him to take him away somewhere safe. They were shaking and muttering about a dragon and almost leapt into the police car, urging the officer to close the door quickly and drive straight off. Danny, wake up, cried Susie, shaking Danny, who was sound asleep after his busy night. There was a burglary at the post office, and one of the robbers got the giant egg stuck over his head, and it's got a big hole in it, so my uncle has given it to me, Susie said in a rush without pausing for breath. Danny opened one eye and then the other one immediately when he saw what Susie was holding. Yum! Breakfast, said Danny before taking a large bite out of the chocolate egg. Danny, said Susie slowly, you didn't have anything to do with the catching of the robbers, did you? Danny just gave her a chocolatey grin and helped himself to another piece of egg. Meanwhile, in the post office, Susie's uncle placed a new, even bigger Easter egg in the shop window to raffle for charity. All the money had been counted and was safe, and he'd had a busy day in the shop as villagers came to hear all about the attempted robbery. They all had their own theories about how the robbers had been caught, and Susie's uncle listened to them all, laughing along with the others when one old man quietly suggested it was the dragon. But later, when he had locked up the post office, he stood outside a moment and looked up at the hill behind the village. Thank you, he whispered, before going home for his tea, whistling cheerfully all the way. The end. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please subscribe and come back again.